the Within Orb podcast. Come get Within Orb. Hello, my name is Jenn Zahrt, and welcome to Within Orb, a production of the Celestial Arts Education Library, a podcast bringing people together around the love of astrology, books. Join me as I interview people about the astrology books that changed their life and practice. You can support the podcast at withinorb.com. Welcome to another episode of Within Orb, and today we're beaming across the country to North Carolina, but actually into virtual reality, into the Astrohut with Jean Eon. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here today. This is really exciting.
I'm glad to have you in my little virtual sphere because on May 12th, you're going to be unveiling this amazing new virtual reality experience for all astrologers, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. On May 12th, we have an event called Welcome to the Astrohut, which is essentially the launch of a virtual reality space for astrologers, whether they're experts or just enthusiasts. It's a place where you can come to teach or learn astrology, depending on what your background is, as well as meet new people and go on all sorts of far out adventures, because there's really very few limits to what you can simulate in virtual reality. And while we're in there, we don't call it a simulation. It's the actual reality.
It's the actual reality. Exactly.
Yeah.
Virtual, actual, what is anymore? You know, I guess haptic is the other barrier, right? The idea of touch.
Yeah, true.
For sure.
But I'm sure we're going to get there. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm thinking of Lawnmower Man, access tonight, access tonight, access.
Yeah, absolutely.
The phones ring. Everybody, if you're listening to this now and the phone is ringing, I'm sorry. Okay.
I hope that happened to somebody.
Yeah, right. You're watching the movie and it's bad timing.
Right. Yeah.
The phone is ringing. But yeah, no, it's amazing that we've come this far into the future. I remember being a kid in the 90s, just, hearing the dial-up modem and getting into the AOL chat rooms. When are we going to get our own experience of this kind of three-dimensional perceptual reality of interaction in the web, and now it's here.
Absolutely. And in fact, we were just having one of our earliest group hangouts in the Astrohut last night, and Patrick Watson was with us, and he was mentioning how his kids also have a headset, and I was like, I can't even imagine having had one of these as a kid. I feel like I played, Sega and Sonic and Tomb Raider, and I thought all of that was super cool, but it wasn't blowing me away. I just kind of accepted it. I was like, these are my toys. These are the things I do. And I wonder if kids are similarly just oh yeah, we just started in VR, because I feel like I would be like, this is absurd. This is blowing, my mind. And so it's really just a marker of where we are at time, that something this complex and immersive and beautiful is probably just considered another toy to some people.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that you're designing this for the community and that we're going to get to see a first experience on May 12th. And actually, I'll be there hosting during your break.
Yay.
People can come to a virtual CAELi and kind of meet me in the library. So if you're listening to this and it's not yet May 12th, come on in. And where can we find you for that, just before we launch into the normal Within Orb conversation?
You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and our handle is @ and then the Astrohut, TheAstrohut. And we're actually asking people who are interested in joining us on May 12th to DM us on Instagram or Twitter, because we're just keeping it really simple right now. Let us know if you want to come. You can find a master thread of all the information related to that day and how to join, how to get a headset, how to avoid motion sickness, etc., on our Twitter account pinned to the top. So yeah, reach out and let us know. We hope to see you there.
It's going to be so awesome. Okay. So let's get into it. What was the first astrology book you ever read?
So the first astrology book I ever read was called Sextrology, and it was by Starsky and Cox, who were, I believe, intimately coupled, but also just these very eccentric astrologers. I actually got lucky and met them once in New York, years after I had got that book. And so I was basically woofing. And for people who don't know what woofing is, it's worldwide opportunities on organic farms. And I was doing that in Marin County outside of San Francisco. This whole time was really interesting. It was I got there at the end of a 12th house perfection, and I left at the beginning of a first house perfection year. My birthday happened while I was living at this place. It was a very new agey farm. I also came out on the farm. Like, that's when I came out of the closet in 2012. So it was like literally going into the first house year, all this stuff. And another friend of mine, Casey Cox, amazing Libra, we met at the farm and they just sort of recommended sextrology to me. And I began reading it and was like, wow, all of these descriptions of the signs really do correlate with my, experience. It was basically breaking down what each sign at the time, male or female, gay or straight, was how it was broken down, was into sexually. It had probably 10 pages on each sign's mythology and background. And then it's like, likes vanilla spread over their body or whatever. It was just like,
whoa,
from very serious to very like at the end of the section. It's an amazing book though. And my astrological journey now has taken me much deeper into like traditional astrology and what different things mean. So it could be fun to go back and see where it contrasts with what was probably a more modern lens that the book was written through, but it was definitely very accurate. And I even compared it to people I'd been with and was like, oh yes, that Aries was like this, that Scorpio was like that, etc. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's a new one to the show. And I remember seeing that book also when I was in Berkeley and going, this looks interesting. I wonder what they're going to have to say about these relationship categories and sort of what people are into. So
nice.
That's cool. That's a cool first book, I think.
Yeah, it was good. And it was thick. So, I mean, what else would you want in a book called Sextrology?
Yeah, no, it stands out on a shelf. It's like this big red book of like sextrology. Like, in case you were wondering, buy this one.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. Okay. So next up, I would love to know if you were going to be stranded in an isolated place, desert island, or, maybe like a secret room in Astrohut that you can't get out of, some other place, what 3 astrology books would you take with you?
So the first 2 are kind of maybe like astrology adjacent, but they have a role to play in my time on this island. So the first one I'm going to mention is The Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. Just because I actually did not complete that book. I started reading it a decade ago and got really far into it. And then I don't know what happened. I just didn't finish it. But I've been thinking about finishing it recently and I need to finish it. And more importantly, it's full of so many like fantastical situations and references to like, this guru levitated and this one went to another dimension, that I'm not here to say that all those things really happened or didn't happen, but the electricity that I felt reading those stories and knowing this was a real person and this was Steve Jobs' favorite book. And, no matter if we can verify that those things actually happened, there's something that was coming out of those pages to me that was like, there's much more to reality than we can claim against. And being on an island like that, it might be a book that would help me get really outside the box, don't sleep for a week straight, get into the whole like other side of my brain mode, and maybe I could teleport off the island or something.
There you go. Yeah.
I think that book just definitely makes you believe you can do magical things if you get into with the universe. And I do think that is related to astrology. And it also talks about some of the greater cycles, the yugas and whatnot. I believe there's mention of that in that book. So even though it's not an astrology book per se, it's nice to see one of those avenues towards it.
Yeah, for sure. I hear you talking about like fantastical tales of things experienced by this person. And it's like, what if we could create a kind of virtual reality experience of them, like a gamification of the autobiography of a yogi?
Absolutely. And that is like what we want people to feel like they're experiencing in the Astrohut. In fact, actually, this is so funny. And I have video of this.
Yeah.
Last night, we're getting things together for May 12th, and I invited everyone to my quote unquote house in the metaverse. But I forgot to put like a floor outside of the like bounds of the property. So everybody fell into the 12th house last night. And like they were just falling and falling, and I couldn't figure out where they were. And I had to go into God mode and literally like, I'm like a giant, and Patrick Watson and Cam Cassidy and our friend Camille are like this small. And I'm like going down and picking them up with my hands and carrying them back up to earth. So
my
it was
gosh.
very much kind of like what you're saying. And there was something really magical about it, even though we wasted like an hour. Like it was just interesting. And I think that ties into maybe we should lean into that, like you're saying, and just have some non-standard experiences with a spiritual overtone. So
Well,
yeah.
here's the truth is that I've also never finished that book. It was assigned to me as part of my astrological education because of his influence
Oh
in
wow.
astrology. And I began it, and then I think I had it as an ebook. And like with ebooks, you open it up and maybe you read the first couple chapters, and then out of sight, out of mind, and you
Yeah.
just never get back to it. So I have not finished it either, but if it were a virtual reality experience, I might actually have the interest to keep going into it.
Yeah, we can do like a series, like a VR series, like you go through the book. I mean, I think that's a great way to learn too, which is actually a very serious point about the Astrohut is like, I'm always thinking about like how was electricity discovered? How did we get from nothing to computers? Well, I can read about like what Isaac Newton or whoever was thinking about when they were inventing things, but what if I could actually go through the motions they were going through that led them to realize, oh, this creates a spark, like
Right.
so
Be Ben Franklin sticking a key on a kite.
exactly so yeah, we want to be able to emulate a lot of things, as many things as we can. One last note about that book: I ended up going to Varanasi because of that book and getting my chart read, which I won't take too much time here to talk about how valid I think that was, because I ended up getting sold a bunch of things at the end of it, but it was a really magical experience, and that is a very magical place as well.
Wow. Yeah. All right. So what would your second pick be?
In similar, quasi-spiritual vein, the second book is called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsig. This I chose because I had a pretty profound spiritual experience when I was reading that book, just in the sense that I went into some kind of state where I felt like I was transfixed, and I probably was just too much caffeine, but I marked it down as this book is very special. And there's many layers to that book. There's like the practical layer of fixing the motorcycle. The author is actually a Virgo, and I believe he was a technical writer in real life, like so manuals and things like that. And the book is about fixing a motorcycle on the surface, but it's also a metaphor for sitting with the complexity and the unraveled, situations that occur both with the self. So the motorcycle kind of becomes a metaphor for the self. He's also talking about like vintage motorcycles, like older machines that are just very delicate, and you have to be very patient and work with the thing to figure out how to put it together, because it's not drag and drop like a lot of things we have today. So that's a metaphor for the self. Like the self is also very convoluted and murky. And, if you think about that sextile between water and earth helps to give form and clarity to some of that more amorphous nature that water has. So it's interesting because the book is kind of about how to create sense out of chaos in a way.
Yeah.
It's about doing that with the mess of a tangled motorcycle that needs fixing, but also the self, but also like the puzzle of existence and what is the universe. And there's just these different layers to like, we're always trying to figure out something messy. And how do you find the calm? And in his book, the Buddhist, lens of finding the calm and the patience and the listening to nature to solve that puzzle. And so for me, that very much echoes everyone's astrology journey, because astrology is similarly an amorphous puzzle, right? It's got all these different schools of thought and all these different things you could be looking at in a chart. And you really do need to find some kind of calm and simplicity to be able to say anything with it, or you could be chasing a bunch of things. So I think those all overlap. And if I'm on an island and I'm possibly trying to get off, that's another amorphous puzzle that I'm going to be calm and work through. So I feel like it would just help give me the sort of meditative patience to either find my escape or be in acceptance with my coming death.
Well, what I'm also hearing you say is an extension of the comparison to a vintage motorcycle being not drag and drop, and maybe vintage astrology being not drag and drop.
Yeah.
And having that kind of finesse of, you got to have that calm, like pay attention and Just be with it, let it speak to you instead of trying to like shove something in there and making it function, you know?
Absolutely. And I might be somewhat popular in a Facebook group called Traditional Astrology, where at one point I was not calm, like begging for a drag and drop question, fighting against all of the things. And I got my ass calmed down, basically, and realized that I needed to be much more zen about that because I used to get very frustrated about contradictory things in astrology. And now I'm like, oh, well, that's just another way I can find an answer. Yeah.
I love the contradictions because it's sort of like, are you ready? Astrology's like, are you really ready for the truth? Because guess what? It's not happening right now. And I think, isn't it in Zen and Art of Motorcycle Maintenance where he brings up the concept of being not plugged in? Like there's on, off, and then there's like not even plugged in.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because he's a Virgo. So it's almost like it's a very mercurial book. Like there's part of it he's together and part of it the protagonist is actually losing his mind. I think he's trying to say, well, some approaches of solving things is very much like following a step by step. And then others is, yeah, like you're saying, having to be more in tune and feeling it. He calls it the classic versus romantic split. So intuition versus rationality essentially is the dichotomy of the book. And I don't know. I just want to go back and read it now because I want to put astrology over all the things I read before I knew astrology.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. No, that's totally the thing. And I love that you're pointing out that he was a Virgo because I never even thought of looking up his chart.
Yeah, I tried to meet him actually, but then he passed away. So,
oh, no.
Sadly, but he was, I don't think he was meeting people. I think the real person in real life similarly became in another mental realm. And that somehow makes it all the more special. But
yeah, these transmissions, very cool.
I want to welcome everyone to the Significant Sources Salon.
We are honored to have Dr. James Dotson host our Significant Sources Salon, guiding you through the books that have been most impactful in the world of astrology.
We have curated several books which I think will be interesting, books that you might not have picked up yourself because they perhaps seem old or daunting, and we will make them accessible to you.
The salon meets for 90 minutes every month with a summer break.
For more details, go to www.caeli.institute.
Join today, and we will see you there. So, what would the third book be that you'd bring with you to this island?
So the third book that I would bring to the island is actually a book that I haven't read at all, but it is called The Astrology Book, the Encyclopedia of Heavenly Influences. And so the reason I thought about that book is because it is actually a very long book. And I think that I could kill two birds with one stone with that book because I'm stuck on an island. I probably want to get off the island, but I also might want to be entertained along the way. So I think its length would, give me a lot to read, but simultaneously I could actually take the pages and create a pretty sizable kite out of the pages to fly and try to, flag down a plane or whatever. An alternative thought I had was I could also, it's enough pages to kind of make a few layers of a sail if I were able to, fashion a boat. But I think there's problems, obviously, if the pages get wet or there's a lot of humidity that would destroy that situation. So the kite probably be the best.
Which author would we need to be apologizing to for this defacing of his book?
Yeah, and so that book is written by James R. Lewis. So sorry, James. I'm actually going to read your book, but this is just, it's got a double purpose here.
Right. Yeah. Well, you got to get some kind of like shellac or oil to like make sure the pages stay waterproof as you get on your way.
I actually researched a bit and found out that animal fat or beeswax can help make it waterproof. But I was like, I really hope I'm not in a situation where I'm trying to extract animal fat. I don't think that's my spiritual personality. So
no, hopefully you'd be like marinating in astrology and not worrying about getting off the island because it's just so cool to be like thinking about star stuff all by yourself, uninterrupted. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Anyway, all right. I mean, even recently, just real talk, some people were stranded in the Pacific and got palm fronds and spelled out the word, I think it was help.
Oh,
And they got discovered by some sort of aircraft that saw this, spelled out on the beach. So you wouldn't need to cut the book up. You could use like palm fronds.
yeah, palm fronds. Well, by saying I want to use the pages for a kite, I don't mean I want to destroy the page. They would still be intact, and readable. It would just be a readable kite, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, now I'm thinking, the kite from Mary Poppins is one way she comes to get them. So you might actually be calling Mary Poppins to the island.
Yeah, no, it could be a little party for sure.
Yeah, let's go fly a kite. All right. So if you were going to help people learn astrology, do you have any books you would recommend to get someone into the practice?
Yeah, so I feel like my answer might be somewhat standard, if not on your podcast, but at least across the community. But it goes without saying for my personal journey that I would actually recommend people start with Chris Brennan's Hellenistic Astrology and Demetra George's volumes on Ancient Astrology, because I think those help to orient newcomers into the history in a way that I was not oriented for many years. They cover a lot of things in terms of how it all fits together. And then also the books that you read about in the recommendations of those books, as well as the footnotes, will lead you to a lot of other places and a lot of other authors that are really valuable. So it's almost like you can see those books as mini libraries in their own. And then because I am much more, I guess, exposed to the Western tradition, but actually my earliest interfaces with astrology were through things like Autobiography of a Yogi and going to India and whatnot. It's almost like I started out, and if I had gone a little bit further, I could have been really into Vedic astrology, but then I just ended up over here.
Yeah.
And like, I kind of am trying to go back. So a book someone told me about recently that I'm really excited to read is Freedom Cole's Introduction to Vedic Astrology. And I think I feel very confident in the Western approach I have, but I need to understand the Vedic as well. And I think an introductory book is probably where I'm going to start. And I would recommend that as well.
That's really awesome that you began some of your explorations with the Vedic and then landed Western and now are returning to it. And your choice of Freedom's book is really great because I think out of all of the things that have been published for Vedic, he's a really good translator for people who need to get into the material. So I find his approach to be quite accessible, even though there are some amazing books. And if you listen to his episode on the podcast, he'll tell you who his lineage is and where he should point you for that extra. But I think that his books are really great textbooks for learning. So that's a really neat recommendation. Also, recommending it even though you haven't done it yourself, because that's where you're about to go. That's a really cool thing. So yeah, I think that's a pretty cool perspective.
Yeah. And obviously, in addition to all that, I think other things that I would say to people just getting into astrology is don't be isolated, or, don't isolate yourself in a closed off, loop of books, right? Like, books are amazing. Everyone has a unique interface with books. People have different life experiences that color what they're going to read. And also they're just the like factual history of where the information comes from and what it means. So you definitely need to read books. But my astrological education became so much more colorful and vivid and validated when I started having conversations with real people. I mean, it was probably 3 or 4 years before I actually was meeting other astrologers. I think one of the first immersive experiences of the sort I had was at a bookshop called Catland in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, where Alice Sparkly Cat was teaching a class. And that was a very interesting experience that was way, on a I guess I would say, more evolved end of the conversation, because there were discussions there about decolonization and whatnot. But then I also went to the Queer Astrology Conference in New York City, and Annabelle Gatt was showing me around there. I met a lot of other people, and I was just like, wow, I couldn't even keep up with all the questions I had and conversations I wanted to have. And then obviously Norwalk, where you and I actually met, and It's almost like you don't have these conferences aren't even long enough for you to get out all the energy you want to get out. But you're able to compare with other people what they think, what they've learned, and it's just you're not going to find that in a book. And that's actually one of the things that catapulted the Astrohut into existence. Was it was still kind of like COVID-y time-wise when I picked up my headset for the first time and started being like, wait, this could be an astrology world, because the year that I was doing that, there was only a virtual NORWAC. Their in-person conferences weren't happening. I was like, well, what if people could just come hang out in here? Like, it's kind of like you're at a conference when you go to the worlds people have built already. And like, but you can do so much more. You can be on Jupiter. You can get on a spaceship and fly between the nodes, like as the eclipses happen. Like, you can do all this other stuff that you can't get out of a 2D surface. I know that in some of the media I've consumed, there are different diagrams of like the meridian and the ecliptic and how all these things intersect. But I was like, this is just so much more digestible if you're actually seeing what it looks like in nature, like in 3D. And that's what I wanted to help bring into existence, was a way for people to actually be in the stars, in the spaces where like a retrograde is occurring, right? Like, we understand it because we've been studying it for so long. But like, what does that actually look like in space? Like, the way we look at the zodiac is not actually how things are in space. So being able to see that, plus you're hanging out with people, plus maybe you're drinking a beer that they don't know about because you have a headset on, or whatever else you're doing. Like, it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah. And maybe you're wearing pants, maybe you're not.
Yeah, maybe not. But you're also like, in an avatar. So there's just a lot of things that can be done at once in VR. You don't have to buy a plane ticket. The headsets aren't that expensive. You can find a used one for $100 and you can have it forever. Like, so it's cheaper. You can do more imaginative things. You can still meet a lot of amazing people. And then you can just take it off and say, I'm done with y'all for the night.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, what's interesting is that we gather at conferences, but we gather now in virtual reality in the Astrohut. And when you come to CAELi, there's like a nonstop conference vibe here too.
Nice.
When there's more than 3 people here, even if there's 2 people, but usually if it's 3 or 4 astrologers, especially if there's people here who have known each other from the conference circuit for a while, it's very hard to stop talking. It's very hard to like, you can just almost feel like you're in a conference kind of all the time. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. There's always that energy in astrological discussion as it is. I think because it's just, the chart in itself is not 2D. It's like 200D. There's this, and then there's the fractal layers, and there's the time. And so like everything everyone's saying sprouts out all these possible tangents. And even when we are in there prepping for May 12th, every 5 minutes, we're like, okay, let's get back to the agenda. Because I mean, last night, some of the tangents last night were the 5 different charts of France, from when it was a Leo sun to a Virgo sun, or rising to a Libra. Then we went on a tangent about German. Then we went on a tangent into the 12th. It's just, that's the nature of it. And that's great. But I think by creating a space that's always open and online, people can get that whenever they want. And it's almost like being in real life.
Yeah, no, I agree too. This acceleration of astrological wisdom from just talking with people and seeing, how do you do that? What do you do that? I think that's a very important component. And one reason why this podcast is audio and there's conversations about the books, because it's not just reading the book, it's also talking about what you got from that book, or what else should be read and could be added to your library of things that you would know about how to do astrology differently. Not necessarily better or worse, but there's so many various things that can be done, So I think it's not just the books, it's talking about the books together that is the important part.
Well, we're really excited that there's going to be a CAELi in the Astrohut courtyard. And I think that's a perfect, addition to some of the other things we have going on. So it's going to be lectures by Patrick Watson as well as Cameron Cassidy. Cameron Allen is doing Astrology in the Body presentation. Gemini Brett is going to walk us through some of those astronomical features. There's Stellarium has a VR app, so that is going to be something we experience as well. And then our friend Camille is also going to be guiding us through some of those transitions with some breath work. So You'll be in the courtyard. We don't even know what all this could be yet. It's a very experimental thing. Every single time there's 10 ideas and we have to pick one.
I know. I'm already having 300 ideas as you're telling me what's about to happen. And I'm like, it hasn't even started yet. This is the debut on May 12th. So that's so awesome. Thank you for designing this or holding space for it to become something. And also thank you for naming it a hut, because that just takes me back to a whole other way that humans gather and cohabitate. It's a really neat concept. I just appreciate all the things that you're doing for the community, and I can't wait to see some of you listening in the Astrohut on May 12th.
Yeah, please join us. Oculus Rift S or Meta Quest 2, 3, or Pro are what you need to join. We're trying to help people find them if they can't, and we'll see you there. Okay,
so beyond the Astrohut, where can people find you?
So I am on Twitter at _Jean Eon _. I'm also on Instagram. The primary one for me is my music and art Insta, which is now is the Eon. And then the Astrohut has an Instagram page, which is at the Astrohut.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks. And yeah, see everybody on May 12th.
All right. You all take it easy.
Thank you for listening to Within Orb. To learn more about the Celestial Arts Education Library, or to become a member, visit our website at CAELi.institute. That's www.caeli.institute. If you enjoyed this episode, please help spread the word. Follow or subscribe to Within Orb in your podcatcher of choice, rate it 5 stars, or write us a happy review. This helps others find the show. We also want to give a big thanks to the indie band The E-Block for contributing their song Wake Up for our intro and outro music. You can find them at their website, eblockband.com. This is Jenn Zahrt, signing off for now. See you next time.